Hello, everyone. We just were talking about is it if it's possible to know when Jesus returned, and in the first part, we were looking at a few verses and different contexts in the Bible that seem to suggest that yes, we can know, and that we should, and that we are encouraged to actually watch and to look. And in this part, we'll take a look at some of the broader time anchors that seem to guide us towards a general time frame in which he likely will return. And it's part of the reason why I had been producing videos over the last couple of months around what the true gospel is, because I just happen to believe that we could possibly be very, very close to the rapture, the start of the 7 year tribulation, as well. And so um, I wouldn't wish the 7 year tribulation on my worst enemy. The only way to escape it is through this pre tribulation rapture event. And the way I understand it, the only way to be part of that is to understand the gospel and come to have your 100% faith in Jesus, in Jesus alone. So, in part two here, we'll take a look at some of these, broader time anchors that seem to signal the end of the age. The first one, we'll just take a minute here. I'll walk you through this. Is that there are just many, many typologies, probably at least 40 or 50 typologies in the Bible that point to a 6,000 year reign of man um, on this earth before Jesus returns. And I'll try to remember to link a video in the description that does a great job of revealing all of these different. It goes through each and every one of them in great detail. It's really amazing, and so they're definitely. I don't think there's anywhere in the Bible that explicitly says that man's time on Earth will be 6,000 years, but there's overwhelming patterns to strongly suggest that likelihood. And there are a bunch of genealogies in the Bible that can give us a sense of how much time has already passed. And for example, we can calculate that Jesus died and was resurrected about or exactly 4,000 years after creation, which was most likely either 32 or 33 AD. And so, when we look at that and we've got 6,000 years, that could imply that, we have 2,000 years to go from the time he died and was resurrected. In addition to that, there's a verse in Hosea chapter 6, verse 2, that suggests that Jesus will return 2,000 years after his death and resurrection. So, you combine all that together, the math would work that if he 4,000 years from creation, he died and was resurrected. And if that was either 32 or 33 AD, add 2,000 years to that for your 6,000 year reign before Jesus returns. That means he would come back to rule the earth either in 2032 or 33. And then the Bible explicit or suggests strongly that there is going to be a 7 year period before he comes back of great tribulation or of tribulation, where it's going to be the worst 7 year time period in Earth's history. And so that would point us to the start of the tribulation period being, what's left of this year or sometime next year. So another time anchor is the parable of the fig tree. In the way I interpret it, it kind of leads to a broader range of the start of the tribulation, probably sometime between 2015 and 2045. Obviously, we're 10 years into that range already, but we'll take another further look at that. And then there's just a couple of other complex prophecies that lead to the same time frame. I'm probably not going to get into those, but there are others. But the major two are the 6,000 year, you know, creation timeline where man is reigning for 6,000 years, and then the parable of the fig tree. So let's take a look at the parable of the fig tree and understand exactly what that is. So here are the verses that are leading up to this parable, so you can get some context. Matthew 24 verses 29 through 31. So immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. And then immediately after that, the next three verses are, now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things take place. And so, obviously, the key here is, you see this as referring to, the time of the end, and then we have this parable of the fig tree, that all these things are going to happen. Um, you know when this fig tree starts to ripen. And so the obvious question is, what in the world is this, or who or what is this fig tree? And so the Bible does mention, compare a lot of different nations and regions to trees throughout the Bible. And just some examples that I found were, the cedar tree typically represents Lebanon. The oak tree represented Bashan, which is in the region of Syria. The palm tree represented Jericho, which is in current day Palestine. And then the fig tree represents Israel. So when we're talking about the fig tree, we're talking about Israel. And so, the next question is, well, it's, Jesus says that this generation shall not pass till all these things take place, after this fig tree starts to blossom. So, how long is a generation? According to the Bible, there is a verse in Psalms 90, verse 10, where it says, the days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength they're 80 years, yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and then we fly away. So, so we have this fig tree, which is Israel. We know that Israel was reborn, in quote unquote reborn, reestablished as a nation in 1948, and we know that the Bible sees a generation as 70 to 80 years, and here we are in 2025, currently 77 years later. So, there's definitely reasons to kind of raise your eyebrows based on this parable. Another thing, which I'm not going to really get into here, but there are lots of prophetic patterns, with two specific numbers: 77 referring to the Gentiles and 84 referring to the Jews. This comes into play where, if you have a 7-year tribulation period where the believers, who are mainly going to be Gentiles, get raptured into heaven, like as the first bride of Christ. And then the 7-year tribulation will be for the Jews, to bring them to understand that Jesus was actually their Messiah, and that they missed them the first time around. Get them to come to the faith. Then they get remarried with Jesus at the end of that tribulation, which would be 84 years later. So, I'm not going to get into that in any detail, but just know that there's a lot of patterns around 77 and 84 as it relates to Gentiles and Jews, and how this could factor into the timing of the rapture and Jesus' second coming. So then the next obvious question is, when does the clock start? So we know, Israel was reborn in reestablished as a nation in 1948, but is that the correct time frame? So, I found 4 significant events in Israel's history. Now, I don't know if any of these 4 are the accurate and correct starting of the clock, so to speak. But and there could be others that I didn't think of. But just to give you a sense, the first one I thought of was the Balfour Declaration in 1917, which basically announced the intention. It was a letter in 1917 from, I think it was from a British foreign secretary named Arthur Balfour, and he wrote it to one of the Rothschilds, basically announcing British government support for the establishment of a Jewish state in the area of Palestine. Now, if 1917 were the start of the clock, then the end of the fig tree generation, 70 to 80 years later, would have been 1987 to 1997. And then the 77th and 84th years would have been 1994 and 2001. So obviously we know that that's not the right marker, because that's already come and gone. The next one would be 1948, where Israel was declared a nation again. That was May 14th, 1948. If this is the correct anchor point, then the end of the fig tree generation would be from 2018 to 2028. And then the 77th and 84th years would be 2025 and 2032. There is another, like a year later, the United States formally and legally recognized Israel as a nation. So, is it possible that 1949 is the correct starting point instead of 1948? Now, if that were the case, obviously you're just adding 1 year to each of these things. So the fig tree generation would be 2019 to 2029, and then the 77th and 84th years would be 2026 to 2033. And then you have 1967, where Israel retakes Jerusalem. And so, if that's the correct starting point for this fig tree generation, then you're looking at 2037 to 2047, with the 77th and 84th years being 2044 and 2052. So, the way I'm looking at this right now, these are kind of the most significant events that I see. One of them we can discount altogether. And so, in my mind, anyway, the best possible time markers for the start of the 7 year tribulation would be, the rest of this year, next year, or 2044 and 45. There certainly could be others, but this is kind of how I see it. And I think in the next video, we'll just go through some specific signs to look for and to see, if these are the two best possibilities, like the next 13 to 14 months versus roughly 20 years from now. Is there a way we can, discern which is more likely? So that's it for now. Thank you so much, and God bless you.